just realized the date is 9/21/21.
And it is.
21.
21. See Jim here?
Yeah.
I think so.
No.
Okay. I would like to invite people who would want to make a public comment, and I would remind all those who are here that we usually ask that you keep your comments to about 3 minutes, and that we really don't allow people to, in their public comment, to comment with names of others, to mention others in their public comments. So, I will open the public comment period here and ask, is there anyone who would like to address the board? Please, when you do that, please tell us your name and your address.
Thank you. My name is Bryce Bjork, and my address is 7229 Genoa Road, Northwest Byron, Minnesota. Thanks for having a few minutes at the beginning. I'll make it really brief. I just came here today to introduce myself to you. I've been doing a lot of research lately. In the last 6 months, I logged almost 2,000 hours actually on the subject, and I'm afraid I might have to draft some type of a resolution. I don't remember the statute right off the top of my head, but I know there is a remedy for what's been going on. On April 26th, some people from social services came and took my kids, and I didn't understand the process or what was going on with it, and Rochester Police assisted them in that. And since then, I've been trying to do everything I possibly can to get my kids back. And without getting too personal and stuff, if anybody has ever had a little girl that's wrapped their arms around you at night and told you that they love you, I promised her that no matter what, we'd always be together. So I have to honor that promise. My kids have been separated. They don't want to go to Richfield School, the two older ones in the cities. They're going to tell you all kinds of things. They're going to say I did all this stuff. I've never had a drug charge in my life. I've never assaulted anyone in my life. The actions that happened there made me irate because someone came back, they told me they were going to take my daughter to my parents' house, and they took her somewhere else, and I overreacted. I was emotional. I was exercising my First Amendment rights of free speech that the Supreme Court recently has upheld. Should be emotional. We're emotional human beings. These are my kids, and kidnapping is serious. I called 911. I asked for someone to call me back. I haven't even been able to get an attorney to return my calls in town here. This is such a powerful organization. We have no oversight at all on these guys. You got an unlimited cap in Title 4E that seems like they can request as much money, and every year they need to have more kids going to foster care. My little girl doesn't want to be in foster care at the end of the day. When I drop her off tonight, she's going to cry because she can't come home to her mom and dad. She misses her brothers and sisters. So I'm just saying, we grew up here in town. My parents are good people. And Dad still works at IBM. I played hockey at John Marshall, for crying out loud. I worked at Workforce Development. I worked for Disney as a maintenance engineer. We're not bad people. We had some troubles. We've already addressed those. I'm here today to admit to you that, yeah, I've haven't been a perfect parent by any means. I can use all the help I can get, but I don't know what else to do. So if you have any questions about anything anybody tells you, please call me. My number is really easy to remember, 289-9999. That's my Google number. Goes right to my cell phone. If you think to yourself, this can't be the same guy they're telling me about, I look a little disheveled and stuff because I remodel houses in town. I get done doing that and I go home and work on the case at night. I haven't even had the boat out this summer. So with that, I'll just take any questions if you have any and let you get on with your meeting. I thank you for letting me speak here today.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, Chris.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Yep. I think he probably needs to know that we listen, but we don't really have a dialogue during the public comment period. That's to you.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to address the board during public period? Is Tiffany here?
I am. I'm here
Oh, there you are.
virtually. I rose my hand. Sorry. All right. Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and County Board members. My name is Tiffany Kaser. I'm a program manager here in Child and Family Services with Health, Housing, and Human Services. But I also am the chair of the United Way Employee Campaign. And I'm here today just to kind of kick off our campaign and talk to you about that. So I've been the campaign chair for the last 3 years. United Way of Olmsted County is a really important organization. They really assist and provide for our community and residents, either through grants or direct service. And these services meet the pressing needs of families and individuals. Our employee campaign with United Way has been alive and thriving since 2011. And really, we feel every contribution matters. In 2020, we did see a significant reduction in the amount of campaign funds. And I think that that was really a direct impact with COVID and the pandemic going on. We had a lot of staff working remotely. So our outreach probably was a little bit tougher to get to people. Plus, some of the special events we usually hold, like a parking spot auction, probably didn't yield as many bidders because people traveling to the office. So our hope this year is to be back to our campaign levels that we were pre-pandemic. So our campaign will run from October 1st through the 22nd, and we hope to raise around $50,000 for United Way. The wonderful thing about Olmsted County employees is once they contribute once, they continue to contribute annually, which is super great about us. And the final thing I'll say today is to get a better sense of United Way's mission, I really encourage you to head out to their website. They have some nice highlighted videos that really talks about the impact they're having in our community. And you can go to www.uwolmsted.org to view those.
Well, thank you, Tiffany. Now, in the past, I know you've had duck races and potlucks and auction items and a lot of departments having competitions with each other. You think you'll be able to do that again this year?
Probably not all of those things. We do hope to inspire a little competition using some data we're going to get from United Way to see who's contributing, and inspire that. The other thing I'll mention is United Way is actually doing kind of a different fundraiser this year that anybody who contributes to United Way gets put in a drawing for a 2-year car lease of a new car from Rochester Car Motors. So that's another thing we'll be promoting as part of our campaign.
Well, that'll inspire people, I think.
I guess.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Tiffany. And we'll get a report from you probably in November about how we've done. But in the meantime, you'll keep us updated so we're always in competition.
Thank you so much.
So we know where we stand.
Well, we
right?
know where we stand. I'm sorry. I guess I could have said it that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Anyone else have a public comment? Any other people with public comment? Third time, any other people's public comment? We will close the public comment period then and call the Tuesday, September 21st, 2021 Olmsted County Board of Commissioners meeting to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good. All right. We will move on to the consent agenda. A, approve the Olmsted County Board of Commissioners meeting minutes for September 7th, 2021. Approve the September 7th, 2021 minutes from the special meeting of the Olmsted County Board in its capacity as the county's Community Health Board. C, accept Public Health Services Advisory Board bylaws. D, approve grant utility easement to the City of Rochester for the Regional Training Center. E, approve agreement to transfer jurisdiction and right-of-way of a segment of County Road 105 to Kalmar Township. F, Accept County Veteran Service Office Operational Enhancement Grant. G, appoint Tanya Rigger as Housing and Redevelopment Authority Resident Commissioner. Establish and approve the 2022 market price for solid waste. And I, approve gambling permit for Stewartville Sportsman's Club.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
And moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We move on now to our regular agenda. First is to adopt the proposed property tax levy for year 2022. And I think Anita, are you going to
Madam Chair,
Is
Anita
this-
and I are here, and I believe Wilfredo is remote, and so Anita and I are kind of the backup
Okay.
in case Wilfredo is feeling quite ill.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And can you see the presentation in your screen?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Okay, so good afternoon, Commissioners. Wilfredo Ramon Catala, Olmsted County Chief Financial Officer. And I'm going to do a brief presentation with regards to the 2022 property tax levy, the proposed property tax levy. Let me know if the slides are advancing. It took a while on my.
It changed
Okay,
to say
wonderful.
Minnesota Truth and Taxation Law.
Excellent. Thank you, Madam Chair. So the Minnesota Truth in Taxation Law basically requires the county to adopt at its the next year's proposed, or basically the certified property tax levy on or before September 30th of the current year. So that's what we're doing today. We're trying to identify that number, which becomes kind of the maximum levy. The final adopted levy may not exceed this levy that we are proposing today. It can be lower, but cannot exceed that amount. And the actual budget will be approved in December, but we also have on December 2nd, we have the Truth in Taxation meeting that occurs at 7 p.m. at the Olmsted County Government Center. And at that time, we'll review details about the budget, and we'll allow the opportunity for our citizens to comment or ask questions as well. So our county property tax levy in 2021, as you recall, we kept, for the current year we're in, we kept our levy or property tax at 0% increase from the year before in 2020. The intent here was to provide relief to our taxpayers during the economic instability driven by COVID pandemic. But at the same time, you know, this approach puts a little bit of pressure for us now in 2022, because then we have 1 year with 0 levy increases. We did the best we could to manage that, but then now comes 2022, and we have salaries, benefits, and things like that, operational costs that need to be satisfied. In 2022, we're proposing a levy increase of 4.90. This is about $5.3 million more than 2021. And one of the things that obviously, just like I mentioned, 0 levy increase in 2021. Now we need this little bit larger increase in 2022, mostly to cover things like salaries, benefits. We have about 10 labor bargain units, all but 2 of which have settled contracts, and those have cost of living increases of about 2.5%. We also have experienced large increases in medical healthcare spending for our employees and their dependents. These started now in 2021. We are not sure how will that evolve into 2022, but the expectation is it will continue to go up rather than down. Perhaps related to COVID and order delay procedures that started with the pandemic in 2020. So we're seeing a significant increase there. Also, for the 2022 levy increase, we will manage to cover with these 4.9 all operational needs, but any capital costs will be covered for things like state aid, federal aid, reserves, and the proceeds from the sale of bonds. So we're trying to make sure we continue to be judicious and cover costs that have long-term useful life with things like bonds proceeds, for example, or if there's any state aid available. But things like salaries, benefits, and other things like that that are more operational, we should always be trying to do the best we can to cover those with current revenue sources, either through levy or other means that are current, rather than pass that on to the future. And as you know, the Olmsted County continues to increase in population, and because we continue to work towards being an effective and efficient organization as much as possible, we have maintained a fairly flat ratio between population and staff. And I know that many people are asking, well, the county is receiving a significant amount of federal funding through the American Rescue Plan Act, other known as ARPA, from the federal government. So why they're not using those dollars to manage the levy in a different way? Well, one of the things we're doing is putting a lot of effort and investment into affordable housing, for example. A significant amount of those ARPA dollars will go through those generational investment and help those families in needs, and especially making sure we have affordable housing here in the county, rather than a one-time decrease in potential levy costs and things like that. So I think that's kind of critical and important for people to understand. Our residents and U.S. commissioners, we're trying to do the best we can to use these dollars in a way that is wise and also that will impact generations to come, rather than just for 1 year or 2 years. I'm going to stop here since the next slide basically covers the HRA property. So I'm going to stop here. I know that's your second agenda item, item 4B. So I'm going to stop here with regards to any questions or comments related to the property tax for the county side of things.
Does anyone have any questions for Wilfredo?
No, I feel like we've had a really good briefing to understand the staff analysis and prepared to support this.
Okay, Commissioner Tyne?
Yeah, so I agree. So I'll make a motion that we move forward with the 4.9% max levy increase that would raise our levy to $112,822,877.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to set the levy at 4.9% increase from 2021. Is there a discussion or questions about that?
Yes.
Commissioner Flynn?
I don't agree with this. We act like, because we didn't increase it last year, it's like the public owes us something this year. That isn't correct. Nobody had jobs, everything was shut down. Just because we had zero last year, so what? That's the way it was. So now if we're thinking we're going to jump 4.9 to replace last 2 years, no, I don't agree with that. Hennepin County passed 3.5%, Ramsey County passed 1.5%, but Olmsted County's got to go 4.9. It makes no sense. We have the most federal money we've ever had in our lives, and yet we're still going up higher digits that I agree with.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah, I'm with
Commissioner Brown?
Matt on this one. It's just too high. I mean, we do have reserves. We did do quite well of protecting our budget with federal dollars. We spent a lot of extra money. We also recouped a lot of that expense. And, this debate goes on among all the counties, but this is just, in this time, and still in the uncertainty that still exists, it's not the right time to increase it at this level. So I'm with Matt. So I know we're going to lose. Yeah, I know we're going to lose too. but you're going to hear what I think. State it. So that's all.
I'm reminded of a conversation I had many, many years ago with when I probably was on staff. If we don't keep a pace with our actual expenditures, And I agree, we did have the benefit of some of the federal money, and we had prudent spending last year, so our budget, when we did got the, we managed our budget well last year. And for that reason, looking at the COVID impact, the economy is recovering. There are jobs out there. We've got a workforce shortage, if nothing else. And we also held in abeyance some of the kind of cost increases that we would have for our own personnel. Our healthcare costs are going up. I don't think I'd want to be in a position in a year from now that we suddenly have we have budget challenges and we have to do an even bigger increase. I think the counties that you quote, I don't disagree. You're right. They didn't raise it as much, but they also got in more federal money, and they didn't invest it in the long term. They invested it in the short term. They invested it in meeting current expenses rather than a long-term investment. So I think with this amount of increase, knowing that our tax base has gone up and that our taxpayers will not have a full 4.9% increase onto our own, onto our portion of the property tax, I think we have to take the long range view about our own financial health as a county. And I think while this is a hard reach for you, I still think it's a prudent thing for us to do.
Commissioner Flynn?
Okay, for the public, residential housing will probably go up 50 to 20% in valuation. You put that number on that, that's going to be a huge swing on residential property next year between the two combinations. They will feel the effect. That's how it works. That's a mathematical equation. There's no way to get around it. So if we're thinking this doesn't affect homeowners, we're sadly mistaken, because valuation plus a 4.9 will equate to that.
I'm not saying it won't affect them, Commissioner. Saying it won't be it isn't what it looks like. And you're sort of saying the same thing to the opposite effect of it's
Well, we predict that it isn't going to hurt nobody. That's not true. And again, I don't know why. I think it's written, we the people. That's government. That's who pays the bills.
Yep.
A lot of people didn't receive increases last year or this year, and is still digging themselves out of a hole from last year. But we have the mindset that, hey, we need that money. We got to do that. That's not the way we should operate.
Yeah, I did read the article, and it just dawned on me that they expect residential properties in the county and the state actually to increase because of both housing shortage demand and everything else, shortage of materials, to increase the raw price, their market valuation by 15+%. You add 4.9% on top of that. It goes against that number, not against the lower number. That's a point well worth taking.
I don't disagree with any of the points being made. My point is the reason I support this is that if our expenses are going to go up by X amount of percent, we must keep up with our expenses, or else we are either taking out reserves, which is what helps us keep a healthy county economically, financially. We have a good reserve that's right in the bandwidth that we want it to be, or we're going to have even larger increases down the road. So if we really want to do, I mean, that's just factual. I mean, we all know that we're entering into an inflationary period too. We can see it at just about everything. So our expenses are going up as homeowners, and as the county makes a lot of purchases too. So expenses are going to go up. Wages are going to go up because there's a workforce shortage. Medical expenses are going to go up because we're going through COVID, and that's all going to come due too. So we're not entering a great time. And I pay plenty of property taxes, so I'm sensitive to this, but I don't want. I think the way to dampen this is let's control our expenses. We got to have our income match our expenses, but if we really want to have a healthy county and keep taxes low, then we need to control our expenses.
Any other comments, questions? All right, it's been moved and seconded. Oh, I'm sorry.
Madam Chair, if you would like a little clarification, Mark Krupski's here. There's just a couple of things that we might be able to clarify about the difference between adding the levy percentage and the difference in years in terms of property tax. Would you want that?
Yes.
Sure. Here comes the property meister.
Good afternoon, Commissioner Pedelki and Board. Mark Krupski, Director of Property Records and Licensing. I was in my office, as I told Ken, I was going to watch the meeting there, but I heard the discussion and I thought we're mixing up some of the years. I sent something in the PD report that residential values will be going up 15, maybe to 20%. That's the 22 assessment, of which the 23 taxes will be based upon. So that's not this particular budget. And what we see happening, another property type that's increasing quite a bit are our apartments. And for this next assessment, and again, I'm talking all impact of 2023, certain property types like banks, offices, and things like that, pretty much almost every property type with the exception of agricultural, and that still may see something, is going up. So what that means in the long term is there'll be a shift towards those property types, but the actual increase in value, the actual home won't necessarily go up by that amount because, for example, residential property is about 65 to 68% of our property tax base. And historically, they were paying about 56% of the tax. And now we're shifting more, maybe they'll pay 57 or 58% of the tax. So there are a lot of moving parts in this. So it's not going to be a 15 or 20% increase in 23, let's say, because of that, because if the value of our base goes up that much, then the rate comes down. And we kind of saw that on some preliminary numbers, even with this budget, because we raised values on average for pay 22 about 8%. But we actually saw at one example, it was going to increase the tax about 4.6% just on the county portion. So what the Commissioner Flynn is saying is true, but I just want to bring some clarity that it may not be to the numbers that you're talking of, that 15 or 20%. It wouldn't be that high.
Yeah,
I agree.
you can never generalize across the board. It's just, but that's another fact that has to be considered.
Right, and we haven't had time to, with all the other budgets, to really look. Like the taxpayer themselves are probably more interested in what is going to be the total that they have to pay county, school, and city or township. So that information we'll certainly have. Wilfredo's group does a great job analyzing that, and that will be available during the Truth in Taxation hearing. But that's what we know for today, and I'm open to questions. Or
Any questions for Mr. Krupski?
I get it. Thanks, Mark.
okay, thank you.
I know. I've
Thank
been
you.
through this
A few times.
a few times. Kind of know
Other
how it
questions?
works. Call the question.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we adopt a 4.9% increase in the levy from 2021. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed?
Hey,
Opposed?
Okay, and the motion carries. Right, 1, 2, 3, 4 to 2. Yep. All right, we will move on then to adopt the proposed Housing and Redevelopment Authority levy for year 2022. Let's see, is someone?
That'll be me again.
Oh, that'll be you again. Okay. All right, we hear the voice.
The mysterious voice.
Yes.
Okay, so
mysterious voice.
so HRA property tax levy. So in 2021, the property tax levy for the HRA, which is the Olmsted County Housing and Redevelopment Authority, was set to the maximum by statute. And that amount was about 3.7 million. At that point in time, the increase was about 6.75% or 239,000 from the prior year, which was 2022. From 2020. So for 2022, the proposed tax levy, we're proposing about 3.9 million, which is about 4.15% increase from 2021, or about 157,000. And just like I mentioned, these both years are set at the maximum statutory levy, statutory amount, which is 0.0185% of the market value.
Any questions for Wilfredo, Commissioner Wright?
Wilfredo, when you talk about the market value, you're talking about the market value of the entire Olmsted County, right?
Yes.
Thanks.
When Sturtville is not involved in this, they did not participate, Greg, so.
Other than Sturville.
Other
Okay.
correct.
Excluding it, yes.
Yeah, they have their own housing authority.
Yep.
That's right.
Do they tax to the max?
I don't know.
Any other questions for Wilfredo? I will entertain a motion.
Tax levy?
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded to adopt the proposed Housing and Redevelopment Authority levy for year 2022. Do I need to state the amount or the percent for the record? I do. All right. Could I see Wilfredo's slide again?
Absolutely.
I wouldn't want to make a mistake here. Okay, so the levy for 2022 will be a 4.15% increase from 2021. Is that enough information for the motion?
I think I think the proposal should say
Read the amount.
levy set to the statutory maximum, which we anticipate to be $3,934,341.
All right, the levy will be set to the statutory maximum, which is 0.0185% of market value, which we estimate will be $3,934,341.
Excellent. Good job.
Thank you.
She doesn't get many of those.
No, I don't get many. Thank you. So, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Good. Okay. C, approve and authorize issuance and sale of lease revenue refunding bonds, Series 2021A, Olmsted County, Minnesota lease obligation, and approve the forms of documents.
I'm going to take a wild guess, and it's Wilfredo again.
Wilfredo, are you going to do that as well?
You betcha.
Okay. Boy, are you getting to be Minnesota? You betcha.
Hey, I'm trying. Been 24 years, so.
It's no Puerto Rican phrase.
Okay, so we had this conversation earlier today at the HRA meeting, and basically because this is the relationship between the bonds are between the HRA, the authority issuing the bonds, but basically the county acting as kind of the security, if you will, of it. We have basically kind of the same information to present to both boards. So I'm just going to reiterate some of that information that I presented earlier today at 1. First, just a reminder that back in August 17, the board provided the preliminary approval to refinance the 2013A lease revenue bonds. And the reason we're doing that is to take advantage of lower interest rates. Like I mentioned before, back in August and also earlier today at 1, the life of these bonds will remain the same with the final maturity of April 2033. We anticipate or we expect the estimated savings of about $318,000 over the life of the bonds, or about $28,000 per year. And today, basically what we're asking the board is to approve the sale of the 2021A bonds to refinance the 2013A lease revenue bonds, and providing the staff the authorization needed to approve final terms of the bonds, as well as execution of the documents necessary through that process. Also reminder, rating calls with Moody's is taking place next week on September the 28th. And awarding of the sale will actually take place on October 19th. And closing of the bonds will take place on November 23rd. Unless you have any questions for me, I'm not sure if Tammy Omdahl from Northland, our financial advisor, municipal advisory, is available or not. But well, if you have questions, happy to answer.
Any questions for Wilfredo?
This is easy. I move approval.
Yeah, one question first. They're actually paid off in 2026 though, correct?
Say that again.
The bonds will last until 2026 and then they'll be done?
2033.
2033, thanks.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Brown and second by Commissioner Wright. Any questions or discussions? All those in favor of approving and authorizing issuance and sale of lease revenue refunding bonds, Series 2021A, Minnesota County, Minnesota lease obligation, and approve the forms of documents. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Now we have a presentation from Matt Massman. Is he on the web for us here? The Minnesota Intercounty Association, which we call MICA presentation.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. I don't know that my video's on.
Not yet.
I'm having a...
You're just an M&M here.
Well, I will work on that. In the meantime, I will start talking so that I don't take up too much of your time. Matt Mossman, Executive Director of the Minnesota Intercounty Association. Hey, thank you so much, Chair Podolsky and Commissioners, for the opportunity to visit with you today. This COVID thing keeps causing us challenges, and we very much look forward to the time and days when we can be with you in person, and I'm here online as well. The rest of the MICA team is here to share an update and really conversation if you have things you want to share with us about planning already for the 2022 session, which we are actively engaged in at this time. A couple things. First of all, we have a 40-page summary that we have made available that just highlights or captures activity that we worked on related to county items. And then we have a PowerPoint that we're sharing with you. We are, of course, not going to cover everything in the 40 pages by any means, but we do want to give you some highlights. Is the PowerPoint going to be shared by...
We can share that on our end if that's helpful.
I'm not sure who's online here that we see.
I would
Is that
appreciate
that Mark?
That's Mr. Novak.
Oh.
Transportation guru from MICA.
Okay. So that would be the next.
He knows it. He's smiling.
Hey, Matt, it's Nancy here. You need to put the video on at your end. We just did that here, just so you know.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
And now we've got the PowerPoint.
And I have been trying that, and it seems to be disabled.
Did you hear that, Matt? We can see the PowerPoint here. We can see it.
Good. So if we go to the second slide, let me jump into it. The state the budget was really good news for counties, frankly, and I think it's I'm not sure that as a former numbers guy, whether or not I'm at some risk of following Wilfredo's presentation here, but we do a lot of work on your behalf to try and make things smoother from the budgeting standpoint, and that's a lot what this legislative session was about as the state was setting its 2-year biennial budget. In the end of the day, after a special session that ended at the end of July. I think it was a very successful year for counties, frankly, in the biennial budget. The legislature ultimately had a healthy budget surplus to work from, along with federal ARP dollars that came to the state, that resulted in a $52.2 billion state budget for 2022-23. About $1.6 billion of the increase in the budget was allocated to new spending, and about $746 million, as you can see there, to mostly one-time tax relief, like the much talked about PPP loan, federal conformity loan forgiveness on income taxes and unemployment insurance. If we go to the next slide, I just want to jump in and I want to highlight a few things here that happened to the benefit of counties and to your taxpayers in the tax and fiscal policy areas, and then I'll turn it over to Nancy Selesky from our team. One of the things that came up as a conversation piece, first of all, owing, I think, to the good work of counties like Olmsted and many other counties on the CARES Act, on the front lines of the health pandemic throughout the course of the year, on supporting businesses and communities and renters and others who were in need. A lot of goodwill was built up with the legislature, and so there was no real conversation at all about pulling back on county program aid. That was always perceived by both sides of the aisle as being a stable program as the budget was being put together. In addition to that, the legislature put $20 million into a 6-year pilot program that will run from 2023 to 2028. And over that time frame, will net north of $3 to $4 million for Olmsted County for homeless prevention services targeting youth and young adults. Particularly, this is the allocation of this money is driven by the number of students identifying or being identified as experiencing homelessness throughout the course of the school year. This is data that's already collected by the State Department of Education, and it will be leveraged to allocate this money. Just a note here, this was actually something that was, in the end of the day, Senator Carla Nelson, the tax chair in the Senate, of course, was helpful in bringing to reality. And this is actually something that Olmsted County receives a slightly larger share of the money on than if compared to if this money was allocated on the county program aid formula. But that, I think, also just speaks to a need that's out there, and so I think that this will hopefully be helpful to Olmsted County for sure. I want to just highlight that there's a reduction in the state general property tax starting in 2023 that will, I think, in percentage terms, be most impactful for your small businesses, as a higher amount of market value, 100,000 up to 150,000, will be excluded from value there. And veterans in your county will receive larger homeowner and renter refunds. A key priority for MICA this legislative session was increased money for broadband. The numbers in the biennial budget bills in conference committee got as low as $30 million. MICA was pushing for $120 million, and ultimately the state settled on $70 million, 35 each year, which is the most that has ever been put in from the state into the state's broadband grant program.
So
now,
Matt,
yep.
A question on that one. What kind of beauty contest is that going to be in order to compete for that money?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, there's actually a little bit of a temporary snafu going on here, in that the state, to put the money in, is going to draw down some of the state's allocation of the federal ARP capital projects money. So the state has to apply for the federal money, then they'll get it, then they'll put it into the state program. That's the way the law reads. That federal flow of dollars is getting slowed down a little bit as they haven't finalized all of their guidelines for the program. But to your question, it will otherwise follow the same parameters as the state program. So applicants will apply, and the State Department of Employment and Economic Development will use their same criteria that they use for the state broadband grant program to identify the priority projects based on underused and unused and geographic diversity.
Yeah, all right, thanks.
Yep. I don't need to spend much time on those other two items so much. I just want to, these are things that actually don't flow to the counties, but I want you to know that they're out there for context as you've been working through your use of ARP dollars. Also, the state put together $250 million that they didn't meet the September 6th timeline, but there still is an expectation that the state will have a plan for providing one-time payments to frontline workers that might have had to take sick leave during the COVID crisis, like long-term care workers, healthcare workers, low-wage workers in the retail and manufacturing industry, et cetera. They also put $150 million one time into a combination of business loans and COVID recovery grants for business community for any businesses that were still facing hardship as a result of the pandemic. So I'll stop there. No bonding bill, we'll come to that in a little bit and turn it over to Steve, I guess, next to talk about transportation. Next slide.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
There you go.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'll get right to it in terms of the results of transportation funding here. Giving you the results not only of the transportation budget bill, but also reflecting back to the fourth special session. Combined in the last 10 months, we had a very good year for the funding of county roads and bridges. To be specific, the transportation budget bill had an additional $14 million for local county bridge replacement on top of the $30 million that was received last October, for a total of $44 million. $5.5 million were included for local county roads, which was in addition to the $70 million that came in the fourth special session, for a total of $75 million. Just to put this in perspective, on a scale of the last 20 years, these would be record amounts of money for county roads and bridges, so we're happy about that. A county like Olmsted, I know, does have some township roads and also small city streets. And there was $12 million put in for township roads, $18 million for small city streets. Again, on the perspective of a 20-year cycle, these were record amounts of money and showed real progress for those elements of the total local road and bridge system. In addition, as we all know and struggled with during the pandemic, a lot of our driver's license exam stations were forced to close in 2020. So this transportation funding bill includes $2.6 million in each of the next 2 years to guarantee the reopening of all driver's license exam stations throughout the state, which I think will be well received by everyone's constituents. Moving through the bill, there was a big section of the bill that applied $113 million in additional trunk highway bonds and $30 million in general funds for specific highway projects throughout Minnesota. And that was well received and will be well received by numbers of people. Some of those were what we used to call earmarks that the Senate Transportation Chair now calls constituent requests. But I note that just to make you aware that that feature of transportation funding seems to be back with us. Some people like it and some people don't. And then real quickly, as I move towards conclusion, let me just highlight a few other things that are in play that you've been reading about. But the federal bipartisan bill, which would be significant for Minnesota, the U.S. Senate, based on the news reports this morning, Speaker Pelosi is saying she's trying to have a vote on this $1.2 trillion bill September 27th, which I guess would be next week. And of course, again, if you're following it, you know that the votes would be there to pass it, but it's tangled up inside this $3.5 trillion package that I guess in this case has the Democrats split over which way they want to go. And I just want to make sure you know that the smaller of the two bills, which is very large by historical perspectives, is very good for Minnesota in terms of road and bridge funding and transit funding. And so it will be a great benefit to us if you do read that it passed.
Mm-hmm.
Getting back to Minnesota directly on the issue of bonding that was referenced by Matt, and a special session, yes or no for September, October. It's pretty clear that it's no for September and up in the air for October. And it's tied up in other kinds of politics that you probably also have been reading about, the split between the governor and the Republican Senate over whether or not they would take up the confirmations of some of his commissioners and not treat them that well. Seems to be holding things up a bit. So we'll see how that plays out. If there is no special session, 2022 is a normal bonding year. So one way or the other, I think over this next 6 or 8 month cycle, we will see a bonding bill. And I bring it up because based on many conversations, I think local road and bridge funding will be a big part of that bill when it finally does get resolved.
Okay.
Again, as we speak, a number of Minnesota people who work on transportation are out in Washington, D.C. for the annual fly-in. This is something that's gone on for many, many years, and this one may be perfect timing because they'll be visiting with congressmen who will be voting on these things within the next 7 to 10 days. So for those that are participating, it could be a pretty unique experience. And then finally, I just want you to know that from a transportation perspective, your county engineers combined with the other Micah County engineers and myself have begun work on the 2022 Micah transportation platform process. And my final point would be just to reference your county engineer, Kay Beniak. I know you already know she does a great job for you, but she's been very, very helpful to our organization, provides a lot of input, and she's an absolute pleasure to work with. So with that, I would conclude and be happy to answer any questions.
So Kate is here, so she just heard that. I'm sure she paid you really well for that one, Steve.
You know.
And also, earmark is no longer a swear word. Is that what I hear from you?
It's creeped back into the process.
I'll be darned.
Some people like it, and some people don't, but it does tend to help pass bills.
Yeah.
Steve, Sheila speaking. Sheila Cascaden. How much of the total funding was earmarked?
I would say that I mentioned a combined $44 million for local bridges, a combined $75 million for local roads, $12 million for town roads, $18 million for small city streets. None of that was earmarked. That's all done through a process that's housed in MnDOT with a lot of input from counties around the state and cities. And no one objects to that process. No one has a problem with that process. And we always have projects ready to go, but for the money. Where the earmarking came in was largely within the context of some of the trunk highway bond money and in particular the $31 million in general funds for projects. Whether you want to call it earmarks or constituent requests, I would say that was where you would find earmarking.
It looks like about half, Sheila.
A relatively small percentage of the total, but distinctly there.
Yeah, all right. I'll be darned.
And I would also have to say that was very clearly an initiative on the part of the Senate, more than the House, and the administration and MnDOT. Those three elements basically have opposed that being reinstituted. The Senate, led by Senator Newman, has pushed pretty hard for that and was successful in part.
Well, it just looks like all of those earmarks, except for Stearns, maybe Rice, really went to metro counties.
Mm-hmm.
A person could make that case. Nicely done.
It's very obvious to the most casual observer.
That's funny.
That's great.
Any other questions?
I think Nancy's next.
Nancy?
Yeah, and Stearns and Rice got studies, but I guess that's the camel's nose, but yeah.
Hi, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I'm Nancy Selesky, and I do both public health and human services for MICA. And it's good to see you, although we wish that we were with you in person. I just want to say that this was a really good year for public health. Nothing like a pandemic to get everybody's attention in terms of the importance of public health. In terms of what they funded, for the first time in many, many years, the local public health grant was increased by 30%, and that amounts to about $15 million per biennium.
Nancy, your slide didn't go. Do you have slides that you're showing?
I'm not doing it. Is there, who's operating the slides? I'm sorry.
With the slides.
What slide number would you like to be on?
It's just one slide forward.
Okay, now you got it, Nancy. Thank you.
And I like to start that actually, commissioners, with there's 8 bullets, but if you look at the report, there's about 20 pages of content. So it's just as you all know, Health and Human Services is big. Anyway, so the local public health grant was increased by $15 million per biennium. They also put $15 million into a new public health infrastructure, $8 million per biennium into tobacco and vaping prevention, $3 million, or excuse me, let me back up, $1.5 million per year for 3 years in a home visiting grant increase. And then I think really important to public health is there was a proposal at one time to reduce the statewide health improvement program, the SHIP program, and that did not happen. So all in all, it was a good year for public health. The legislature also addressed a number of human services priorities that we came forward with. The first one I want to mention was the DHS accounting error related to substance use disorder services within IMDs. The DHS, again, made an error that would have cost counties statewide $8.3 million. So we went to the legislature and are happy to report that they did take that money out of the general fund. So we were held harmless on that. There were also a couple of tribal nations that had similar issues, and they also were made whole. So that was good news. Waivers, as you know, we're all operating and doing business in different ways as a result of this pandemic. As a result, DHS had issued a number of waivers. Commissioner Cascaden and others, and a lot of human services folks, went through those voluminous number of waivers and kind of picked out some of the ones that it made sense to continue permanently. We went to the legislature with a package of 4 items in that package. Senator Carla Nelson was the author in the Senate, so we worked closely with Olmsted County's legislators there. And I'll just hit you with what the 4 issues were. We can do targeted case management through using telehealth. Min choices reassessments can now be provided remotely as well. The reassessment can, if the person's situation or condition has not changed. The county, the client, or his or her guardian has to sign off on that as well. But that's if nothing has changed in that person's condition. We also modified the number of housing support absent days that a person can be away from their housing. As an example, if they're seeking COVID treatment or mental health treatment, substance use treatment, we want to be certain that the person has a home to return to after that treatment. The legislature also, wait a minute, missed a couple. We can also do take MFIP applications remotely. That was another one that was part of that waiver package. And this all passed during the special session, which was in June. Also, during the regular session, which of course ended in May, there was a 5th waiver that was addressed, and that allows child protection workers 5 calendar days to visit with the child in the system, in the child protection system, if it's confirmed that the child has no contact with the alleged offender. We have up to 5 days to make that face-to-face visit. Prior to this legislation, it was a 24-hour turnaround, and it was very difficult for those workers in some situations to travel to another state to meet with a child that was in the system. Also, if you look in the report, there's a dozens of waivers that are addressed in the telehealth article of the bill. So we were successful mostly on that front. Legislature also invested in mental health this year. They put $1.75 million increase for 3 years into adult mental health initiative grants. They also added $16 million to adult mobile crisis services. And then they created a new program this year. They put $5 million into a program that is intended to facilitate when a child is released from psychiatric residential systems back into the facility. There is a new system that they're looking at. Again, it's to facilitate the transition back to the community of children that are being released from these residential treatment facilities. The legislature also did some rate increases for employees working in certain settings, including ICFDDs. PCAs received an increase, as well as other home health workers. One thing I want to point out that was a priority for Olmsted County deals with child care assistance. There's language that provides for temporary reprioritization of child care assistance under the basic sliding fee program. And that is from June 1st of this year, 2021, through May 31st of 2024. So about 3 years that covers. We did pick up one county cost shift, and again, this relates to the Wilmer facility, the Child and Adolescent Behavioral Health Hospital. When it's deemed that that child no longer needs that level of hospitalization care, and yet there's not a bed for that child, counties pay 100% of the cost until that bed is found. Savings to the state and or a shift to counties is $2.4 million per biennium. This does put this payment in line with the other direct care and treatment facilities, the Anoka Metropolitan Regional Treatment Center, the CDHH hospitals, etc. We are paying 100% for those people that, again, are not needing that level of care. I'm kind of reinforcing this because we've been working with the Department of Human Services on this for a very long time. It's not that we're sitting on people that we want them to remain in these facilities. The reality, as you know, is there's a shortage of beds to be able to get these children and adults transferred. I also want to point out that the last numbers I saw for the county cost share, where this 100% county cost share is about $16 million per biennium. And those dollars go into the general fund. They don't go into the systems. So we've been talking to both the department and legislators about trying to get some of those dollars into the system. So I just wanted to reinforce that. The legislature was able to come to an agreement on the eviction moratorium. From the time of the signing of the bill, which was the end of June, people could not be evicted for 3 months. And that date is coming up. It's October, when that 3 months is going to be ending. This is intended to drive people to the state website, which is renthelpmin.org, to apply for the literally hundreds of millions of dollars that is sitting in the state's coffers that Congress passed earlier this year. There is an exception in terms of eviction if a person has violated a lease for something other than non-payment of rent. They've destroyed property, as an example. Those people can be evicted with 15 days notice. I just want to mention a couple things that didn't happen very quickly. There were proposals in the Senate that would have impacted counties. One would have capped the disability waiver allocations. Another would have frozen MinChoice's reimbursement at the 2019 level, so technically it would have been a block grant. And the third would have imposed a county cost share on placements of disabled individuals 18 to 27 years of age in certain settings. None of those cost shifts did pass, so we were happy about that. I too want to close by recognizing your staff. I work closely with Graham Briggs, Jennifer Burkholm, and others, and I just want to reiterate that they do so much good work, not only for Olmsted County, but for counties as a whole. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Madam Chair, I just thought the board might be interested in knowing that as Ms. Selesky talked about the public health infrastructure grants, there's an intention that there'll be $6 million a year for 3 years to go to counties for innovation. And then there's $1.5 million that the department has for looking at its own infrastructure and making some changes. What I wanted to point out is that Graham Briggs and I will both be serving on the work groups that are looking at how those funds, what's the process for distributing those funds. So we have some direct connection into that work. And then I did have one question for Ms. Selesky. You mentioned in the 5 principal waivers were passed standalone in Health and Human Services, but then there was a big technology bill, and you said 12 other waivers passed in that technology initiative. I think that was Senator Rosen's. Are there other things that were in terms of waivers that I thought we had identified like 44 different waivers we were hoping for. Have we given up on waivers, or is there still some appetite to try and get more of that process improvement through waivers enacted?
Madam Chair and Commissioner Cascaden, there are, I think I said dozens of waivers.
Okay.
Yeah. In that telehealth article, there were a lot of other things that were addressed. That's something that I think we're going to go through with your staff, Human Services staff, to see what might have been missed, to see whether there are others that we should also be looking at. But no, that I didn't highlight all of them, but they're in the report under the telehealth article.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
That's great.
Thank you for that report.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
For the benefit of our colleagues at MICA, our legislative committee did meet this morning with Ms. Bergquam and kind of went through the AMC priorities from their policy committee meetings last week. Looked at our list, and I know that she's prepared to talk with you about a couple of things that we're particularly interested in, like the classification of waste to energy facilities and data sharing, and but she's really we've met with her and she did a nice job of bringing us up to date and kind of look through items. So we should be in a good place for our staff to be prepared to work with you and AMC on finalizing those providing our input and reflecting some of MICA priorities and our priorities. So.
All right, I think I'm next. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. I am Carly Stark, and I cover corrections and public safety for MICA. I will try to be brief. The big win for this legislative session was the increase in Community Corrections Act subsidy and county probation officer reimbursement. So basically an increase in funds for counties that provide probation services. Though it was only a one-time increase, it's been a few years since there's been any increase, so that was a good thing. And additionally, there is a community supervision study group that has been formed to look at the funding model and try to find a more equitable funding model that ensures that people receive very good probation services regardless of which county they live in. There has been a trend of the state support remaining flat and the county support increasing year after year. So we're looking at a complete overhaul of that funding system to try and fix that problem. The 911 telecommunications fee decreased from 95 cents to 80 cents. However, the Emergency Communication Networks Division of the Department of Public Safety did double the amount of distribution that public safety answering points get, which means more money is going directly to dispatch centers from those 911 fees. Unfortunately, we did not get emergency management readiness grants. We got close, and I'm hopeful for next year, but I think the influx in federal emergency management funds from the CARE Act and the ARP probably had something to do with that. The last one, I'll let you read more about it in the summary. It's basically a cost shift that we helped prevent. It's a bill that would require courts to order neuropsychological exams for a large number of cases. The bill had counties paying for it, but it has turned into a feasibility study to look at how much it would cost, how it would be implemented, and hopefully to find a different source of funding so that it doesn't cost counties $8 million a year. So with that, I will conclude and stick around for any questions. Oh, I suppose one last thing, I'd like to give a shout out to your now Deputy Administrator, I believe, Travis Granzi. He has worked really hard helping MACAC, AMC, and MICA with their corrections platform. And now Nikki Niles, your current corrections director, is also very involved. And we did talk about the data sharing provision at the AMC conference last week. So you have amazing staff in your county.
Amen.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Madam.
I'm sorry.
Matt's
Who was
up.
that?
That's Matt.
Somebody from above.
Oh, Matt Massman?
Yeah, Madam Chair, sorry, I should have waited for you to ask questions, for if there's questions. If not, I can proceed to the next the slide that's there, and my computer's telling me I need to restart it in order to activate the camera. So I can only describe for you that I'm wearing my most brilliant suit and tie and was fully prepared to address the Olmsted County Board, and we'll have to go with that. You know, there's a few things certainly that Micah, we also try to cover that are identified by you all collectively as counties, and just a thank you to Commissioners Cascaden and Brown for your service to the board and helping put together each year our priorities, as well as to advocate for them. I just want to call out a few additional things. We did a lot of work, or we've done work with partners around, and we'll do more on deputy registrars. That's an area that are coming up short for counties that operate those programs. I'm going to skip down to the middle of the page, just call out Senator Cascaden's comments on waste to energy, and thank Commissioner Brown for his frequent testimony and advocacy on behalf of MICA and AMC last year around that issue. We continue to prioritize and work to make sure that the ability of counties to do that is not impinged upon in terms of the waste hierarchy. So that continues to be an important issue, and we will work with you all on that. We also got some increased money for SCORE grants, which was a little bit unexpected. It was something that we did push for, and the Senate took the lead on, and ultimately we were successful. We prioritized and got some increased money for replacing septic systems, and as well as for invasive species. I should clarify that that's AIS, not terrestrial, which we still hope for some baseline funding going forward. And we also avoided what would have been a mandatory mortgage and deed transaction fee that counties would have had to have put in place in order to provide base funding for soil and water conservation districts. The soil and water conservation districts instead will continue to be funded out of the Clean Water Fund. So if we go to the next slide, just highlight, and then happy to stand for any questions. I'll pause here. We, as I said, are obviously looking forward to the 2022 session at this point. There are a number of interim studies and work that's going on. Carly mentioned an important work in the community corrections and probation officer funding formula area. We are eager to have that hopefully pan out to an increased funding opportunity this next session. There's also a couple of studies around 911 telecommunicators. One in particular that we are that I'm sitting on, and Carly is working on another one related to whether or not those employees should be in the para correctional rather than the para general plan. But just a number of things that are going on. We also anticipate that cities are going to come forward with an LGA increase proposal, or at least a formula change, and I think that counties should. I wanted to call out county program aides, especially as with the levy conversation that you had. That I think is just something that is really important. County program aid is currently at $264 million, which is essentially the same level as it was at 21 years ago in the year 2000 in nominal dollar terms. If that had grown simply by inflation, it'd be about 56% higher, about $412 million statewide. So sort of think about that in terms of the Olmsted County budget. That is an intergovernmental finance sharing mechanism that has been significantly eroding over time, and we think that we want to make some more progress on that. Thank you again for hosting the 2021, albeit remote, but the annual meeting in January. I think that was really helpful at making some important connections. We work closely with Chair Liebling and Senators and Chairs Senjum and Nelson. Nearby now Majority Leader Miller in Winona County and Chair Pulowski and just other members of your Olmsted County delegation are very helpful to our efforts, and you have a lot of strong leaders in the legislative process that are important to our work. So happy to stand for any questions.
Yeah, Matt, Ken, you got any sense of what November's forecast is going to look like, or the results?
I genuinely, I think it's going to be almost jaw-dropping potentially, given the context of everything that we've been through. It's a little bit, it continues to be a bit surprising to me just how much the revenues are exceeding forecast. We ended, the state, I should say, ended the 2021 fiscal year at the end of June 30th with over $2 billion more in revenue collections than was forecast. And that money was not used by the legislature. And they continue to run month to month above forecast collections in 2022 so far. So I think it will be significant.
Sheila, you want to get into the compensation?
Pardon me?
Matt, we talked about compensation limits, one of our favorite topics that is always dead on arrival. But we've gone for a waiver, and we've been turned down. Do you have any insight or anything that you can give us, suggest that we may approach that differently? They have a pretty arcane formula on how they manage that, and I don't know if you're familiar with it. If you're not, just say so. But we're debating, since we know the legislation is probably dead for now or in the near future, but any advice on trying to get a waiver through?
We were just thinking that last time we applied for a waiver, we were frustrated because the city of Rochester got one and we did not. And the criteria seemed really strange, that they got higher points on things that, we share territory, we share buildings, we share all sorts of things. And why did they get a waiver that we could not get a waiver? And so we think some things are kind of strange in the way that the calculations are made, and we wondered if you or someone could help us look at how to be more successful if we decide to submit a waiver again to be exempt from those salary caps.
Get some relief anyway.
Two things. One, happy to look at, I don't know the specifics of the last proposal. I know the context of how it was oddly decided in favor of the city and not for the county, and that was problematic, but I don't remember or have the details. And so I think happy to engage offline, and I do have obviously folks that I know that are engaged in that work at MMB, and see if we can make some progress and better understand how they arrived at the decision, and if there's any way to change that.
Great, we'll do that.
The second point I think is that, obviously this should be repealed. It's the only state in the country that has such a limit, and we just simply have a legislative roadblock that we continue to work to get through, but a key member who is opposed to making the law change, and we'll keep working on it.
Thanks. All right, we'll follow up. Thanks, guys. We also think very highly of our staff across the board, so thank you for your comments. They are, we think, if not the best, certainly one of the best in the country.
You're welcome, and of course, thank you to Heidi and her whole team from us as well.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
And moving on now to Dr. Ricard. Annual medical examiner presentation.
Now we're going to MnDOT?
Did I miss something? Oh, I did. I missed Mark Schoenfelder. I'm so sorry. Hope he hasn't left.
I have not left.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Thanks for allowing MnDOT to come and present our 10-year plan to the county board here. And Heather Lukes has joined us on the call here. And I guess maybe before I get into that, I'm not sure if folks don't know me, I'm the district engineer for MnDOT for Southeast Minnesota, which are the 11 counties here in Southeast Minnesota. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Heather Lukes. She's our planning director, and she'll kind of walk through the presentation.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Madam. Thank you to the board for allowing the opportunity. If it's okay, I'm going to share the presentation from my screen. I'll give it a try here. If you'll bear with me, I'm going to get everything set up.
It's there.
Can you?
Kind of.
Put it into show mode.
The presentation. There we go. How's that?
Yep, good.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Well, as an Olmsted County resident, it's been certainly interesting hearing everything that's going on today. As Mark said, my name is Heather Lutz, and I'm the MnDOT District Planning Director. On the call today, besides myself and Mark, we also have Greg Paulson, our Assistant District Engineer for Program Delivery, joining us, and Tracy Schnell from our Planning Office, and Mike D from our Public Affairs Group. On this picture here, I want to point out to Olmsted, the board, Olmsted County here, this is a picture of the Highway 63 bridges being constructed from earlier this spring. For today's presentation, we are going to be sharing information on transportation planning activities in the state as well as regionally in District 6 in our 11 county area. We'll be going over updates and changes since last year to our 10-year district roadway and bridge work plan. And then we'll have an opportunity to share information on current upcoming program and plan projects in Southeast Minnesota and Olmsted County, and conclude with some local and regional project updates. The first plan I'd like to mention is called the Statewide Multi-Modal Transportation Plan, or Fmtp. This is really a high-level plan that helps MnDOT set policy and priorities for all our other plans and construction programming. This is a plan that must be updated every 5 years. It's actually required under state and federal law. And the SMTP currently is being updated, and the update and public outreach for this is almost over. But this year, some of the focus areas compared to the last time around are changing. Some of the focus areas being looked at are aging infrastructure, climate change, equity, safety, and other transportation options. I would encourage folks to maybe I have some websites later on for you to look at, but you can find a wealth of information about the outreach and where we're going with the SMTP update. The second plan I'd like to mention today is called MNSHIP, the Minnesota State Highway Investment Plan. And as with SMTP, MNSHIP is also being updated, and this is also updated every 5 years. MNSHIP applies the SMT policy and strategy and provides us direction on how we do investment on our trunk highway system within our target investment areas. The previous MNCHIP investment strategy was balancing investments in repairing and maintaining existing state highways infrastructure with strategic investments in improving travel time reliability. Now, what does this all mean, and what were these target investment areas? The target investment areas included asset management, which consists of pavement condition, bridge condition, roadside infrastructure condition, and the roadside infrastructure are the culverts underneath our roadways, our guardrail, our signing, and lighting. Another investment area was called critical connections, which included bicycle and accessible pedestrian infrastructure. Traveler safety is another investment area, along with regional and community investment priorities. Now, the public engagement for the 2023 through 2042 MNCHIP update is just starting. And with the engagement, we really want to gather feedback on different approaches to investing in the state's highway system and understand better Minnesota's priorities for where we should be investing. And the information being gathered will have influence on it. I imagine next year, the following year, when we get to visit, I hope we get to visit in person, there could be some new investment areas with possibly maybe new and emerging technologies such as CAB. As I said, MNCHIP is being updated. I would really urge the board and other members of the public who can see this presentation to check out minnesotago.org, give us your input, MNCHIP, and find out more information. Now I'd like to give you an update on a regional plan we've been working on. It's the District 6 Freight Plan Update. And this is an example of a modal plan we're developing at the district level from a statewide plan. And the long-term objective of this plan is to identify opportunities to improve freight infrastructure for all modes that use our system in Southeast Minnesota. And we do have several different freight modes. On the slide here, you can see, port, cargo airports, pipelines, our highway systems, rail lines, very diverse down here in Southeast Minnesota. And with this freight plan, we hope to identify some long-term, to identify opportunities to improve the freight infrastructure for all the modes I just mentioned. More specifically, probably looking closer at the trunk highway. And these future investments will help to increase the economic competitiveness in the region. Currently, we are in the data gathering phase and have been reaching out to freight carriers and manufacturers. And we're also conducting a virtual open house. And the virtual open house is live for public input. So we'd really appreciate your time to check that out and go to the open house. Your opinion and your feedback does matter to us, and we'd appreciate hearing from you. Transit planning this year, there's a lot of things happening. On the slide here, there's multiple efforts. I'm only going to highlight a few of them. At the district, we are kicking off the local human service coordination plan. We have a consultant that we're going to be assisting us with this, and we hope to have them on board here in mid-October. And with this plan, it's really going to help us redefine the goals in our transit and service transportation and help to measure the region's capacity to serve the transit needs. We're excited for this update, and this is something we update every 4 years. Recently, we held a Southeast Minnesota Transit Roundtable, and thank you to Commissioner Cascaden for joining us at the Roundtable. And this was a great opportunity where we brought together a broad group of transit stakeholders to learn more from each other, what they have going on regarding transit in Southeast Minnesota. And also we heard a lot of great information from MnDOT's Office of Transit and Active Transportation. And this is an event we hope to start holding annually every year to keep that conversation going amongst all the transit providers and partners here in our region. And if you haven't had opportunity yet, our Connected and Automated Vehicle Group, the CAV office, is testing the autonomous shuttle in Rochester this year. The official public kickoff event is planned for September 30th, but the 2 shuttles are already in operating now to gather data and input. I hope to make it to downtown Rochester soon to take advantage of that and see what it's like to ride in an autonomous vehicle. Next, I'd like to transition into updates on our 10-year highway plan. I'm going to go briefly over this. Our 10-year work plan actually consists of 2 different documents that we combined together for the 10-year work plan. Years 1 through 4 is our STIP, and that's the Statewide Transportation Improvement Program. And these are projects that have dedicated funding, and we bring together all the areas transportation improvement plans into one big document. We really do work hand in hand, especially with RoCog in this area, to make sure the right projects are being listed. We also have the Capital Highway Investment Plan, the CHIP, and this is projects in what we would consider years 5 through 10. And these projects are planned. They're currently not funded, but they are, they're on our radar because of forecasted pavement condition, bridge condition, and other concerns. And we're out scoping and planning for these projects, and likely they will be moving into our STIP years, depending on funding. Like both the STIP and CHIP are updated annually, and this process is a continuous process of updating these plans, and it's a lot of putting together a big puzzle.
So for the first 4 years, you have identified funding sources for everything prioritized there, correct?
Yep, for the years 1 through 2, which would be years 22 through 25. Currently, Commissioner Brown, if I'm hearing the right voice, are program projects with dedicated funding sources.
Yeah, sorry, it's Ken Brown. You know where this is coming from is that we have a critical need safety-wise. We expect in with the County 104 interchange project, which is not recognized in any place in your 10-year plan, even though I understand in the first 4 years, but to at least list it and prioritize it as a critical part of your 10-year plan, even though it's not funded, and we're working hard to find sources, would at least give us credibility in mind's eye as we went to the federal government or other places, other sources. But the fact that it's not even listed by MnDOT, they look at it and say, well, MnDOT doesn't even care. Why should I care to fund your interchange? I'm not looking for you to commit to fund this on our behalf, but we believe this is a very critical need, very dangerous intersection. We have big problems with J-turns. I think the expense of putting those in versus the upside versus being able to apply that to the interchange is pretty superfluous. So I'm just asking, right? I'm not going to beat you up. I just say if you could at least list it, recognize it as a priority in your 10-year plan, it gives us leverage points for when we go seeking funding from other federal grant type programs. That's all I wonder about, okay? And I'll let it go. I'm not going to get belligerent nor raise my voice, which I have tended to do on this subject, but would appreciate any feedback that any of the 3 of you had that tell me why you can't just acknowledge that it is a priority.
Commissioner Brown, I appreciate you bringing that up. I do have a slide a few further down dedicated to that. So if I could go to my other slides, and if we could follow up on that when we get to that slide.
All right. Sorry.
I respectfully asked
wait
to answer that if you're okay with it.
Yep, thanks.
Okay.
So Heather, this is Sheila Kiskane. The question I was going to pose is tangential but related. How is it that things get on your list? Who do you confer with to make your 5-year and your 10-year plans?
Our 10-year and 5-year our 10-year plan. We get we coordinate with our local MPOs in our area.
NCO is what is an NCO?
The Metropolitan Planning Organization,
Okay.
ROCOG, or we also have La Crosse Area Planning Organization that covers the La Crescent area for Southeast Minnesota. We coordinate what's within their plans, but also we get a lot of feedback based on forecasted pavement conditions and bridge conditions, and we use information like that to look out and say, okay, which road, in order to maintain our pavement qualities and our bridge qualities at the levels that we're required to maintain our federal funding, what projects are best to be planned to be fixed and changed.
So you confer with the locals, but you really don't take the locals' information into your priority setting.
Again, based on the current MNCHIP investment direction, it's maintaining pavement conditions and bridge conditions for a large portion of our funding guidance and investment direction is given to us. But we also do listen to our partners, but we trying to balancing all the different priorities that we're given is quite challenging.
Maybe I'll jump in just to kind of add on to what Heather was talking about. So, and it might be, Heather, if I think, I'm trying to think what you have on your presentation, but you're going to get to the slide about where we do our investments. Mm-hmm. And so here we are. So maybe I'll let her speak, but I think where she was going with some of this is, again, we look at performance measures and we have certain targets for our bridge and pavement conditions. That's priority number one. And you'll see what she's going to talk about here are the investment categories. She did reference MNCHIP, which is our overall investment guidance document. And so I'm going to let Heather take it away and continue on, and then I'll be around to answer some questions here as well.
Yeah. So I'm going to go back a slide just real quick. When we do our outreach, I always like to share how our anticipated budget does change year to year. The green line represents what the forecast or the anticipated budget was for 21 through 2030 when we visited last year. The blue line represents our anticipated budget for 22 through 2031. And things have changed. In our years, we did have quite a funding cut. And every year, this forecast does get revised based on recent funding budgets, the anticipated annual increases and decreases in revenues. So we take all this information based on some of the performance measures that Mark talked about to plan the project. Now I'm going to skip to the next slide here. And this shows our CHIP targets. That would be years 5 through 10, are currently 2026 through 2031. Our target, the dollars that we were given to spend to improve pavement conditions, and our actual, which is in the lighter green, or the second line, is where we're at as we worked on our projects. As a reminder, MNCHIP really directs the capital investments for our state highway system by identifying the priorities given the current and expected funding projections. And this graph really does reflect the priority currently in MNCHIP for pavement and bridge condition. And the category here, regional and community improvement priorities, RCIP, is very low funded, and that is a category where investment direction would to be okay. You have 140 actually per year in the CHIP. We're given a target of only 140,000 for this area, and this would be a category where for Olmsted County, wanting the priority being an interchange, we are only given a guidance of 140,000 currently under MNCHIP. So it is very challenging right now for major parties such as this to have dollars to dedicate when we're tasked with meeting pavement and bridge conditions.
Heather?
Yes.
Heidi Welsh would like to ask a question.
Heather, this is Heidi, the administrator. Could you explain? I don't really understand. I'm not an engineer, golly. But I don't understand the chart, the difference between target and actual, given that you're talking about out years. So is the dark blue, I understand the target part, but then how do you know what the actual investment is going to be for 26 to 31? I don't quite understand how to interpret that. Can you help us?
So, yeah, but great question. So when we plan our projects and we have a roadway project, we have what the estimated cost would be, and we do, if you want to call it an engineer or planning level investment to repave Highway 14 from Marion to Chester. It should cost this much for the pavement, this much to improve the culverts, and we have come up with the construction costs. So the projects that we picked, are the projects that we picked, the projects that we're planning to do based on, the pavement and bridge conditions. This is how much money will be dedicated for that. So in our area in Southeast Minnesota, outside of the metro area, we have some of the we have the second most amount of culverts, and guardrail. So our roadway projects, we actually don't spend, if you want the full investment amount to pavement condition, because when we do a roadway project, we also have to replace bad culverts, repair guardrail, maybe put in new lighting. So we're given an investment target to try and meet, but based on the projects that we're planning to do to maintain pavement and bridge conditions, things can be slightly different. So it's an estimated cost to improve a project that we're planning to do.
So, Madam Chair, I have a different question on that slide. So the RCIP is Regional and Community Improvement Projects, correct? Did I follow that? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So you said that the 104 interchange would fit into that Regional Community Improvement Project funding, which you have almost none of. But why doesn't it fit into traveler safety, since we've had fatalities at that intersection? Why is that? That's my question about how you're choosing. So you're telling me you come out and you talk to the WorldCog and similar organizations, but there's one thing that's just preference. There's another whole thing when you're saying we've got an intersection where we're having fatalities and near misses. To me, then that isn't a regional community improvement program. That's a traveler safety issue. So help me understand I don't understand how those two. I don't understand why you're categorizing 104 as a regional community improvement program.
It would be, truly, I think, you'd probably consider
Good question.
a combination of both. Traveler safety often, some of that money is for, some of that money does go towards our HSIP program, our Highway Safety Improvement Program, dedicated federal dollars, and there's a application process for that. But it's also adding new guardrail, and it's spread out, and those dollars are spread out throughout Southeast Minnesota. And this, along with RCIP, is truly an underfunded category.
So I'm leaving this presentation with the impression that earmarks are the only way to get things done. And I don't really think that MnDOT wants to be in the situation where political people feel that the only way they can protect their constituents is with an earmark. And we just heard a presentation from Micah, Minnesota Intercounty Association, on the amount of money that we got last year. And when you look at all the earmarks that happened, and they're mostly in the metro area, it doesn't leave a very good taste in one's mouth, shall we say. It stinks. So I don't follow transportation issues that closely, but this is, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, I'm just trying to give you some honest feedback from one of the counties you serve, that this isn't making any sense to me about why this traveler's safety issue, why this intersection isn't considered traveler safety, and why we're still talking about it years later and it's not even on your 10-year out year plan. I'm just really surprised and flummoxed.
You know, traveler safety and, you know, RSIP are, you know, are definitely underfunded categories. That's why, you know, it is really very important for voices to be heard in developing the next MnCHIP investment guidance. And, you know, hopefully we will see, you know, maybe more money. Hopefully, you know, there could be more money in traveler safely, could be more money in our RSIP category, so we can coordinate projects, major projects such as this. Olmsted County, you know, we're setting up, you know, what we're doing right now with advancing the project development, the preliminary engineering, and environmental documentation. It's putting, you know, it's moving the, you know, the County Road 44 project in a very, you know, very good position to make it more construction ready, depending how funding does come out over the next couple of years. Mark, do you have anything to, Mark or Greg, anything to add? Otherwise, you know, as I did say, we do have one slide that's a little more time for local and regional updates.
I think maybe I wanted to maybe address one of the comments here, and that is I do want to recognize that, you know, again, with traveler safety, those are typically those lower cost, again, Heather touched on it, right? These proactive type safety projects that we've seen at spot intersections. You know, there might be roundabouts, there might be rumble strips. You talked about cable median guardrail. Those are the types of projects that are traveler safety, if you want to say, call it that investment category. One of the things that does fall into it, and I think Commissioner Brown touched on that about getting, you know, again, looking at this interchange and getting it into the 10-year plan. One of the things that we are doing will be those reduced conflict intersections, which are a proven traveler safety component. So I just want to touch on that. But then the other comment I did want to make is, you know, in regards, you know, we talked a little bit. Again, I heard the presentation from Micah as well. In reality, and we can look all around Olmsted County and Rochester, most of these large capital projects that have happened, whether in southeastern Minnesota, even statewide, have been through special programs. MnDOT does not have the budget to do these large scale projects. I mean, we can look at a variety of projects from years past around Rochester, whether it's 75th Street, up in Orinoco, 40th and 48th Street. You know, these larger projects have all come from special programs that the legislature has set up to fund these types of projects. So I did want to just make that comment. So I know MnDOT, we do not like earmarks, but, you know, the unfortunate reality is, you know, where that sustained funding level is with MnDOT and transportation funding, it's just not there to do these projects. So that's where, you know, we really look to the legislature to provide some funding for some special programs. And I'm going to turn it back to Heather.
Before you kill the messenger, but it is frustrating. Go ahead, I'm sorry, Mark.
This is Mark Tynan. Do we have any say? Can we reject the reduced conflict intersection? Let's just go with status quo. I think it's a waste of our taxpayers' dollars.
You know, and I respect that comment, Commissioner. One of the items, and the dollar amount isn't as large as you think, and Greg might be able to chime in on what the actual dollar amount for that particular intersection. It's again wrapped into a larger project. One of the things, and I say, I'll look in, even in my good conscience, we need to do something at that intersection, whether
Right.
it's, I think years ago up by Orinoco when we were having issues on Highway 52, we just closed the median. I mean, we can do that and not spend any money, but in good conscience, I can't sit here and say we can continue to allow people to cross, that median crossover the way we're doing today. So that's why we're looking at a project here.
I hear you. It's Ken Brown again. And the issue I have with these terms, I hear you. You say the numbers are better, you say reduce conflict, etc. But when I look at the design of these things, I look at 52 and up in Dakota County, you put a deceleration lane in, then you put the hook in, and generally these people are not just joining the, for instance, northbound movement. They're trying to move over 2 lanes and hit a turning lane in there. So when I look at these things, in my mind, this is no different than an at-grade interchange where you go halfway, and then you got to get in, you got to gauge the speed. You're talking about a 65 plus mile an hour speed highway. People make mistakes, and yet you force them from a standstill into traffic that's moving 65 plus miles an hour. I don't get it. So if you're going to do these things, what just amazed me is you put in a deceleration. Why didn't you put in an acceleration lane? Move it further away from the intersection. Give them a chance to accelerate into traffic, just like you do with a normal interchange. I don't get it. So I just don't buy your argument or statistics about that this thing is so much safer when you allow me to decelerate, but then go from standing start to 65 in a heartbeat and make a right-hand turn. This is where you guys lose me. Just absolutely lose me on the design of these things. I'm done.
So, Madam Chair,
Commissioner Wright?
I'm listening to this discussion, and of course, we all deal with budgets. We all have requests for people to come in with budgets, so we understand we have to make some decisions on that. But I do agree with Commissioner Brown that if you can't even get it on the list, there's a problem there. And now that Highway 14, the last segment of Highway 14 is going to be closed, so it's going to be 4 lanes freeway. It's going to bring more traffic. And of course, we have a corridor of commerce, and of course, we want to maintain commerce. And Olmsted County is the 4th fastest growing county in the state. It just appears to me that it's going to have more traffic. And somehow I think that we just miss that idea that it's growing in this area. There is going to be more traffic. We are going to have more commuters, and we're going to have more truck traffic. So I don't know how that gets taken into consideration, or if it does get into consideration, but I guess I'm asking, hoping that that is taken into consideration, because if we're 10 years out, and not even on the list now, and we have to wait another 10 years, it's going to be overwhelming at that on Highway 14. So, thank you.
We're abusing them. Sorry, we're abusing you guys.
I guess I can jump in and respond. No, and I appreciate those comments. And it is one thing, and I'll share this with the board. MnDOT, and I'll just say the district here, we're committed again to working with county staff, Kay and Ben. Everyone's been great to work with. We're going to continue to look for opportunities to fund the project. I think it's a big step of going through and doing this preliminary design and the final design, and to get this thing to a spot that can compete statewide in some of these statewide programs, whether it's corridors of commerce, as how Highway 14 was funded. you know, that's what I can say today is we're going to continue to commit to look, you know, kind of think about ways to find some funding for this project. You know, again.
Right, and Mark, that we have suggested ways that we could fund that, in that we can find money from bonding and such to put the money forward, but what we asked for is a commitment from DOT to pay us back. And we can't even get that.
Yeah,
so,
and that's.
Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, I say, and you know, that's one of those pieces that, you know, with the district and Heather's maybe, you know, her previous slide showing where we spend our money. You know, I appreciate that the county board is willing to bond to get this constructed, but at the end of the day, in reality, it's like, you know, MnDOT, then our piece to it, we're in basically incurring debt, right? It's like we're taking the credit card and we're going to do an IOU to the county, and we don't have the funds when we look at all of our performance measures to pull off, and I don't even know what dollar amount that would be per year, if it would be a 10-year payback, a 20-year payback. You know, again, to look at trying to find those funds to pay the county back. You know, there are a lot of other needs, especially in Olmsted County, where, you know, we're right now our traffic staff, they're working with county staff on Highway 30 and County Road 1. You know, so if you look at, even if it's, you know, I've heard those comments where, well, even if you paid $2 million or $3 million a year, that's a roundabout. Those are other intersection improvements that we have all across the district.
Yeah, no, I mean, we should let you guys finish. I understand it's getting late. I think we have another presentation, so you could buzz through. And we really do understand a lot of the problems. We try to get bonding earmarks. Earmark is not a dirty word as far as I'm concerned. It's just a synonym for prioritize. Just that what you're hearing from us is that we consider this to be probably the highest priority project at this point in time for safety, access, commerce, and so on in this county. And so that you hear the frustration come through. We don't need to beat it anymore to death. You guys understand it. We understand it. We will do everything we can to put it forth, and we ask you guys to just do whatever you can to help along the way and let you finish the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners. I have skipped ahead several slides, and I'll just highlight a few projects here in Olmsted County that we're going to be doing over the next 10 years. I would like to share, you know, over the next 10 years, we have approximately a little over $100 million of investment being done in Olmsted County currently between 2022 and 2031. Excuse me here a second. Some of our upcoming projects, just to kind of highlight here, in 2023, we have a bridge replacement project on Highway 30 near Chatfield. In 2024, we're going to be resurfacing Highway 30 from Stewartville over to Chatfield and replacing the signal at 63 and Highway 30. In 2025, we're going to be doing a mill and overlay of the Highway 14 belt line within the city of Rochester, and they're also looking at what improvements could possibly be done at the Broadway and Highway 14 intersection, because that signal is getting older. Also in 2025, we're going to be replacing the current County Road 35 bridge over I-90 west of Stewartville, the Bear Cave School. And once this bridge gets replaced, the shoulders will be will be a little wider to better accommodate the bicyclists that do take that route in the summer, and the snowmobilers that travel over it in the wintertime. I forgot to mention the big project in 2024 where we're going to be replacing the I-90 bridges over Highway 52 and making ramp improvements to better serve the freight and traffic movements, especially going from Highway 52 southbound over to I-90 eastbound.
Could I ask a question, Heather?
Yes.
In the roadway formerly known as Highway 63, now Broadway, and Highway 14, a former city council member kept telling us that was on the MnDOT plan to redo that intersection by Crossroads Shopping Center to eliminate the right turn only and is that on your plan at all? Or is that just a desired change on that part of that council member? Is that in your plan?
So we are repaving Highway 14 in 2025, and they are taking a look at the intersection of right there by Crossroads, Chick-fil-A, Soldiers Field intersection for improvements.
So when you do those plans, do you confer with our physical development? Well, that's in the city of Rochester, so it'd be the city of Rochester you'd confer with. Let me just call out that we're an adjoining property owner, and we are trying to develop Graham Park and the former Seneca site. And if there are ways that we can be conferred with as you're doing that planning, it would be very helpful to us because we're looking to the future for the Seneca site and to Graham Park, and that intersection becomes a critical juncture.
Yes, and our project manager has been reaching out to Ben Griffith and Brian Law, as well as the city Rochester, to gather information and talk about their project.
I'm glad to hear that and hope it continues.
Yep, and this will be a project with a very heavy public involvement. So I hope to hear your voice, and we do really enjoy coordinating with Ben and Brian. They're great to work with, along with Kay and Ben.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And I'm going to just kind of move on in the interest of time here. If there are any future questions on any projects that in Olmsted County, please do reach out to me or send your questions, whether it's through the RoadCog staff or Ben and Kay. I'm always happy to answer those, or feel free to give myself a call as well. And real briefly here, we've had a great discussion concerning Highway 14 and CASA 44, what will be happening in the near term, and what the future plans are, along with the hope for interchange in the near term, not long term. But I would like to highlight briefly two other area interests. One, I would like to just a brief update at Highway 30 and County Road 1 intersection. Our district traffic staff has been gathering updated traffic data, and that'll be used to recommend safety improvements. I know they've been having continued discussions with your Olmsted County engineering staff as well. Oh, I skipped ahead here real quick. And then at Highway 63 or 75th Street, 18th Avenue intersection, this intersection was submitted for an HSIP funded project last year for a possible intersection improvement, such as a roundabout. It was not awarded funding last year because they were not awarding funding projects in fiscal year 26, but our district traffic staff would like to submit that for HSIP funding this year, and we'll be reaching out to existing staff on that application process to make sure everybody is still supportive of it.
Great.
And just real briefly, Highway 52, if you've been trying to go up to the cities, there's a lot of orange cones out there. We did start a 3-year project where we're going to be reconstructing Highway 52 southbound and making other improvements. So please check out these websites for continued information, or have any questions. As always, you can get a hold of me. Highway 14 expansion and from Dodge Center to Owatonna is planned to be open to traffic by November 1st. So I know we need rain, but we don't need rain. So it depends how you want to shake that rain stick. And then We do have the Highway 52 and I-90 improvement project, which I mentioned briefly, beginning in 2024. We will, our project manager has had conversations with Ben, as well as reached out to RoadCog, and we will make sure to continue to keep folks involved in that project as it's developed.
So on 52, it's just the southbound lanes that you're
Um,
reconstructing?
So on Highway 52, yes, it's just the just southbound, from just south of Cannon Falls to north
Right.
of Zumbrota.
Yeah,
And Highway 52 southbound actually has the original Highway 52 pavement
Yeah,
from
right,
1929 underneath it.
and a couple of bridges, right? Or is it just the
Yeah.
one bridge in
It is. Oh, yeah, I have my notes here, and
There's two bridges at Zumbrota.
But yeah, I got it. Thanks.
Yep.
That's all I need.
Yep.
Yep, that was the original
Perfect.
Highway 52.
1929.
Well,
And briefly, please do stay in touch. We always do have some great, healthy conversations.
Oh, I've got your number, Heather.
You can always laugh. You can always laugh. Always laugh.
Yep, we're all friends, right?
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
follow
Yes.
us on Facebook,
Yes, we are.
Twitter. Check out 511. Reach out to myself, Mark, and I really wish we could have been there in person today. I was hoping to pick up John Hardy's for supper tonight. Now I have to cook.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
You do.
Okay. Well,
Thank you.
All right.
speaking of the rest of the day, Dr. Ricard has graciously waited and said that he will be, or she?
There he is, right there.
Oh, well, would you like to give your report now, or is it too late? Would you like us to reschedule? What's your preference?
You're muted.
I can't hear you.
You're muted. That's the quote of last year.
That's right.
And this year.
And this year.
You're muted.
I don't think he's hearing us either.
Oops, we still can't.
It actually doesn't
Can
look
hear
like.
you? Can you hear us?
Unmute.
Okay.
We don't have audio from him. Oh, well.
I guess we're gonna have to reschedule.
We may have to reschedule since. Oh,
He's gonna try something.
call tech support.
Your mute button comes on and off at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, it does.
This appears not to be our. It's very strange, yeah.
I told you on.
Perhaps if we postpone, we can have the doctor perhaps he'd be willing to come in person.
He looks like he wanted to
Dr.
talk
Ross,
today.
would you like to come in person on October? Oops.
I think he's gonna try to hook up.
Okay.
Maybe we can abbreviate the report. That'd be fine.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute.
Oh, my word.
I wanna know how
Oh,
many.
this
Well, that
is-
was fun.
Yes, okay.
She's pretty nervous. She's gonna have to stop and get some Pepto-Bismol.
You just got that talking. I don't understand why people
That
are nervous
Catherine's
talking to
husband?
this board. Let me grill her.
We were very reasonable and very.
You know more
You were.
people than I do.
There's 7 people talking to her at once.
I know.
He's back. Let's see what happens.
Richard?
Wow.
No.
Yeah, we can see you. We can
Let's
watch
see,
your
we've
lips
got a
move.
great picture of you. Great.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Golly.
What is your preference, sir, Doctor? Would you like to report now because you're there, or would you like to postpone?
It's entirely up to you. I'm happy to present or reschedule. So whatever you guys want. You guys have been sitting there for a long time as well.
Well, you've been waiting a long time too, so
Do a quick update.
we'll be happy to hear your report.
Okay.
Now,
Do you want me to try to share my screen, or would you like to present that?
We can do either, whatever you prefer. We have your presentation ready here too.
Okay. Let's see. Why don't you just pull it up instead of me figuring out a new system here?
Absolutely.
This is getting old, isn't it?
It'll take just a minute for us to get.
There it is.
Up.
Oh, it's
All right.
up. All right.
Perfect. All right.
It was gone.
Went away.
I will say that that's the second county board meeting that I've been able to observe the MnDOT updates, and so if you'd like me to give it next time and provide the color commentary, I'd feel comfortable providing that report as well.
How's your blood pressure?
Suffice it to say, we will be much nicer to you than we were to them.
I can say the feeling seems mutual across southeastern Minnesota.
Okay. I hope no county board members show up on the statistics after listening to DOT.
All right, if we can go to the next slide. So this is just a reminder of the jurisdiction that we cover in the Southeastern Minnesota Regional Medical Examiner's Office. The dark blue counties are the counties that we provide all the medical examiner services for. We also provide consult autopsy services for Steele County and La Crosse, Wisconsin. So really helps tie together the Southeast Minnesota death investigation system.
Interesting.
Next slide. So this is a rundown of our staff. About 3 years ago now, almost 3 years ago, Dr. Reed Quinton joined us. He was the Assistant Chief Medical Examiner for Dallas County in Dallas, Texas for about 10 plus years. So he has a wealth of experience. We also have a new forensic pathologist. I hate to say new because he's not new to forensics, but who just joined our staff, Dr. Ross Zumwalt. He'll be with us part-time, but he was the chief medical examiner for New Mexico for over 20 years. So he's got a lot of experience too. Monica Kendall is our supervisor, and below that are our other death investigators in Olmsted County. And these are the folks that really are the frontline staff that are answering the calls 24/7, 365, reporting the scene. So they're we keep the wheels on the bus moving. At the bottom, you'll see a number of groups here: Office of Decedent Affairs, Pathology Reporting Specialists, etc. And this is really our administrative support staff that helps put together presentation, manage our data, etc. Go to the next slide. This is obviously the number of cases that reported, and as you all mentioned today, the population continues to grow, and our work reflects that. So our number of cases reported was about 1,800. We much prefer to have cases reported to us and us be able to do an investigation and decline it, jurisdiction if need be. So we certified after postmortem examination 265 cases, and we did 229 complete autopsies, and we did a few limited or examinations or external examinations. 303 were certified without postmortem examination, and so these are typically cases that someone falls and injures themselves. It's well documented what occurred to them. Falls under our jurisdiction, but we don't need to necessarily do an autopsy to determine why they died. 1,275 we declined jurisdiction of after we did initial investigation. It's probably worth noting that there's numbers are a little bit higher than usual because at the beginning of the pandemic, the COVID deaths were being reported to us. So if you click forward once, you can see that about 83% of the deaths that occurred in Olmsted County were reported to us, or we are in touch that case in some way.
I think you have to move it forward.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So next slide. So just as a brief reminder, the death certificate for the families has two main constituents: the cause of death, the reason why they died, the manner of death, which is the circumstances, and there's 5 of those categories, and we'll go through those in a minute. And of course, there's lots of pieces of other data that are there that are used for public health purposes. It's important to the families. There's been a lot of talk of death certificate certification, death certification in the past year and a half or so, but this is used for the relatives, really for closure, but also for the personal effects and other things that they need to address. But then that information flows up to the Department of Health in Minnesota, then ultimately to the CDC. So it's just an interesting way that information really connects from the ground level all the way to the national level. Next slide. So this is the death categorization by deaths by manner of death, excuse me. And you'll see that natural death is really the leading cause of death in the county, which is good. That's what you really want to see, followed by accidents, suicide, and then homicides. Next slide. So if you take out all the natural deaths, you're left with a mix of categories. So these include accidents, suicides, and homicides. Falls is leading, and sometimes that surprises folks, but that's because you have older individuals. They maybe fall and hit their head or break a bone, and that really begins their decline. And then that's followed by poisonings, which is the public health term for drug overdoses. And then motor vehicle accidents. And we'll go into those in more detail in a few. And so it's important as we go through these numbers that, because so many individuals are transported to Olmsted County for medical treatment, that the number of deaths that occur in the county are artificially raised. But as we go through some of the other data, you'll see how we categorize it by where the injuries occurred. So now we'll move to the suicide by means, and you can see it's a mixture of firearms, like hanging, basically, drug overdoses, and we had one jump. Yeah. So we do see that periodically, falls for height or jumping as a cause of death by suicide. And so you can see the suicide per capita rate. And so this is our 2020 data. It's the 2019 data by comparison because it lags by a year. And then this data, it's driven by where the injury occurred. So again, that's sort of adjusting for if someone injured themselves in a different county, but they were transported here to Olmsted County and died, their death certificate would be captured in Olmsted County. But this data is pulling out those cases, which is important as we go through the subsequent slides. And it's also important to recognize that we're dealing, fortunately, with relatively small numbers. And so a small change in the number of cases can really drive that per capita rate. Next slide. So this is an example where you have all the deaths that occurred. So this is homicides and all the deaths that occurred in the county. So again, if they were injured elsewhere but died in Olmsted County, it would be listed under this data. So we have a mixture of firearms, blunt trauma, sharp force injuries, as well as asphyxiation. So this is the homicide rate per capita. Fortunately, we're quite low compared to other states and jurisdictions. Next slide. And so that's why you would see that number is lower there, because that's pulling out the number that occurred elsewhere. So accidental deaths by type again. So falls is really the leading cause, followed by motor vehicle accidents and drug overdoses. So under the other category, which is really a mix of things, that includes things such as hypothermia, carbon monoxide. There were some work-related accidental injuries, such as a combine, that sort of type of injury, and so sort of a mix of different things that we fortunately don't get them in such a category to pull them through or put them into their own category. So this is the motor vehicle crashes, and this is again the deaths that occurred in the county. So that means if they were injured outside of Olmsted County but were transported here, that data would be captured in this category. So you can see that there's really obviously automobile is really the driver of those, and followed by motorcycle, pedestrian, and other. If we move on to the next slide, it's broken down. And so this is really the various categories. This is a screenshot of an entire database that we have behind it, but we could drill into it. So at some point we wanted to spend some more time and we could potentially demonstrate how we could drill down into what each one of these cases is. And so this is really where the fatality occurred and what the type of vehicle was involved. And so you can see there's quite a range of vehicles involved, including lawnmowers.
And trains.
Which kind of, yeah, it's kind of surprises people, but people will drive anything that's got an engine, and obviously that increases the risk.
Substantial number of pedestrian and
Yep, you can see where that's clustered in the obviously in the downtown area, and so that's pretty typical. Not in the sense that that's where you shift from really high-speed motor vehicle crashes in more densely urban areas, and then as you move out, they become the higher speed, and the pedestrians typically cases decrease. And obviously, you can see, and the next one is the number of deaths by year. And you can obviously see the power of having year-over-year data and address some of those issues. And so, again, from my perspective, I really truly appreciated you all really drilling in on those sort of key at-risk areas, because I mean they truly are dangerous in some locations. So this is the motor vehicle fatality rate per capita. And so this is lower than our total numbers because these only include those in which the injury occurred in Olmsted County. So next slide. So this is the poisoning or drug related deaths. And so if you look at our illegal drugs, we had 11 methamphetamine, 4 fentanyl, and 2 that were methamphetamine, fentanyl, and heroin combined. And so I think it's something that's important to appreciate is that over the years there's obviously been rightfully so a huge focus on the opioid epidemic, but methamphetamine never really went away, and we still continue to see that as an important contributor to drug overdose deaths. And what the other category you see growing is the mixed drugs, and this really is a mixture of a variety of drugs. What we see more and more commonly is methamphetamine mixed with fentanyl and heroin, sometimes also mixed with prescription drugs as well. Next slide. So this is the overdose drug rate, death rate per capita. Again, relatively small numbers, so we can move that percentage pretty dramatically, but definitely lower than the highest rate in Appalachia and West Virginia that's been hit extremely hard. Again, this reflects that the injury occurred within the county, so it's slightly different. It's lower than just our total number of drug overdose deaths in the county, because that reflects those that were transported into the county for medical care. Next slide. So this is natural causes by category of death, and so you'll see that the leading cause of death is heart disease, and that followed by cancer, and that reflects across the nation as well. You'll see that neurologic death is increasing. I anticipate that will continue to increase as our population ages. The greatest risk factor to develop a dementia is aging. And so as our population ages in the years to come, I suspect we'll continue to see that category grow. The other category I'd like to highlight is pulmonary. You'll see that there's a dramatic increase there, and that's a reflection of COVID deaths. Yeah.
Yes, there's a question here for you.
Doctor,
sure.
Which column is COVID?
Pulmonary.
Pulmonary.
Yeah.
And the neurological, in addition to those diseases that are related to dementia, is that also stroke?
Yes.
Or maybe stroke is related, I'm not exactly sure.
Nope, stroke would definitely be included in that. And again, age is also an increasing risk factor for that as well. Yep, good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what we've seen for what it's worth in the COVID cases is the majority of our patients have been dying from the pulmonary complications. We haven't really seen those individuals die from stroke and other neurologic complications from COVID, like you sometimes have seen reported. So, death by age group. I mean, this is really what you want to see is it's shifted as far to the right as possible. The only good news about our graphs is this is one where we keep having to add age categories. It used to just be greater than 65. So fortunately, we're moving things in the right direction. What you'll see is if you see spikes and peaks in lower age groups, that's reflecting people of dying of non-natural deaths, such as accidents, suicide, and homicides. And so, because you're not those younger age groups are not dying of their natural diseases.
Right.
Could I ask you to restate something you just stated? I was coughing
Yep.
while you were speaking.
Yep.
Did you say that the people who got so ill with COVID that they died tended to die of cardiac problems rather than pulmonary?
Of pulmonary.
Of pulmonary.
Pulmonary. We haven't seen most of the deaths that we've seen have been related to the pulmonary complications. We haven't seen really the stroke and neurologic complications.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, in full disclosure, I'm a neuropathologist, and I've actually been sort of working on looking into those cases, so pretty familiar with them. All right. Next slide is just a summary of our activities. You'll see that our investigation and particularly our reported deaths increased, and that's a reflection of COVID. Postmortem examinations increased, and so did our scenes, as well as our death certificates. And again, across the country, medical examiners in general have seen an uptick in their activities as the COVID is pandemic, particularly initially. Obviously, those were falling under medical examiner jurisdiction. Drug overdoses have still continued, as well as motor vehicle accident. And again, as I stated initially, our work volumes really reflect the population size. So as the population grows, so too will the medical examiner activities. So I kind of blasted through there very quickly. So please, if you have additional questions.
I just have one more question. We've had this little discussion before. So I'm a 75-year-old person with cardiac problems, and I get COVID, and then I die of pulmonary. But so how do you decide if my underlying condition was the driver or it was the COVID?
That's a great question. And so we would review each one of those individually. So if you had underlying medical conditions but got COVID and you never recovered from your COVID and back to your baseline, or you continued to decline once you develop that infection, then that would either be the cause of death or at least a contributing condition. If you've made a recovery from it, or you've basically gotten to a new baseline of this is your sort of stable functioning, then that would be less likely to be included on the death certificate.
Thank you.
So, yeah, and I think that's an important point, because what's created some of this controversy around the country is some individuals, when they sign death certificates there's what we call Part 1, which is the cause of death, which is greater than 50% likelihood that that's what someone died from. Then you have Part 2, or significant contributing conditions, which by definition is less than 50% likelihood of causing their death. Some people, when they sign death certificates, will just list everything there that they have as far as medical conditions, and that's when you start to get into some of these controversies, because maybe they died in a motor vehicle accident and they list that they had heart disease and COVID, and it's not really related to why they died. And as this group knows, obviously these are reportable diseases. So these are, when their tests are positive, they're being reported obviously to the health department, and that test positivity rate's being captured that way.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's it.
I have a question. The falls, jumps and falls that you talked about.
Yep.
The falls look like they're really increasing. And is that something that public health looks at? Because, you know, one of the ways that we tend to solve everything is we just make it a public health problem and then we have to look at it. But is that a growing public health concern?
I'm not sure I would say I wouldn't say it's growing because I would say that it's been on the public health's radar for years. This is, if you fall and get injured in a hospital, it's one of those never events that's reported to the state and is published annually. It's something that's tracked and noted in a number of venues. So I think it's appreciated that it's a really major public health issue. I think it's what we're seeing is an uptick in that as a reflection of the aging population and that being those that are vulnerable to these types of injuries, and then obviously the complications from them.
Commissioner Wright, we just had a report on falls actually
Yeah.
in the Human Services
okay.
Committee, and so it'll probably be either in the minutes or maybe in the packet.
Okay.
There's a lot of work going into trying to prevent falls.
Yeah, it's a real challenge.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Just one follow-up point for the board. Graham's online there, and he's going to give a follow-up presentation to the medical examiner's data and information that really will get at and what does that mean to the county. So I think that's scheduled, Graham, am I right, for next meeting?
Yep, that's the plan.
Okay, so just giving you more, there'll be more discussion of what does this really mean for us at the county. Graham will handle that piece at the next meeting.
You know, Graham, it's really, November is no shave month.
One of the perks of the pandemic is you have a little bit more latitude to grow a beard.
It's taken, this is 18 months of growth?
Oh!
Yeah. It's a lot of hard work for 18 months.
Madam Chair, I do have one more question, and I know I drive everyone crazy with my questions, but I've had a hard time understanding the difference between, since COVID hit the elderly, they were at much higher risk of death, but they're already at much higher risk of death. So how much of a factor, when I look at your data that 300 more deaths to be examined this past year, how much of a factor do you feel COVID has been in accelerating, I guess would be the right word, the deaths of older adults? I mean, is it been I mean, some people will say, they would have gotten the flu, they would have died of the flu anyway. That's kind of the coffee table happy hour conversation you sometimes have with people.
I guess I haven't seen data that would go back and compare that differences. There's obviously a lot of variables that go into that. And there's worse flu years, just as an example, than other years. But if you look just at the uptick in our pulmonary deaths, I think that shows you the real, just in a very high level snapshot, the really real impact of that. And I will also say this, I mean, as someone who signs death certificates regularly, I mean, I signed 3 death certificates of individuals who died of COVID today that would not otherwise be dead if they did not have COVID, and they were all elderly individuals, just as an example.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you.
One more comment. I just saw today an email of Southeast Emergency Medical Services that statewide vehicle deaths are up, and more and more are being attributed to not wearing seatbelts. So you may want to keep that on your radar. I don't know what's happening, but it's been going down for years. Now all of a sudden we've seen an uptick in numbers and cause of not wearing seatbelt.
Not wearing seatbelt and not obeying traffic laws and driving like maniacs.
Buckle up.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, you can't overstate the importance of seatbelts, and obviously, even with the modern airbags and other safety measures, that's not always enough to override not having a seatbelt. We've been looking at those numbers, and so we have, ongoing work drilling down to the specifics of, because those questions are coming up. What's the association with the pandemic and drug overdose deaths, suicides? What about those that are dying outside of the hospital? I mean, we have seen that, like, and we've actually published on it with our emergency department colleagues, where they saw decreased number of people coming to the emergency department, and we saw increased corresponding natural deaths occurring outside of the hospital. So we have seen that and have looked at that. We haven't, in our counties, seen a huge uptick in the motor vehicle fatalities, fortunately, but obviously that keeping an eye on that.
All right.
So I have one more, I'm sorry, then I will stop, but in
All right.
in the last 2 years, I have had the unfortunate luck of being on a highway and being like the second car after a motorcyclist lost their lives on the highway. And it's very sobering. Whenever I see a motorcycle, I practically want to slow down and let them pass me, I am wondering if what the fatality rate is per mile or, of motorcycle riding compared to vehicles. I mean, it just seems to me like, obviously, if you have an accident, you're much more likely to have a fatality. But I've been in 2 places in the last 2 years, and then another friend had a death on motorcycle. And do medical examiners look at the risk factor? Is there a risk analysis for motorcycle riding versus driving?
Yes, I mean, that data is out there. I don't have it at the tip of my tongue, but there's definitely the per mile driven fatality rate, which is why it's so dramatic when you see the drug overdose, accidental drug overdose rate supersede motor vehicle accidents, because which occurred in 2011 or thereabouts, because that's with more drivers on the road and many more miles. But people do look at that. I just don't have that information at hand. And your point is well taken, that the margin for error in a motorcycle is just not the same as if you're in a car or SUV. Things that would be survivable may not be in a motorcycle.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may add on to Dr. Reichert's comments, I think this is a great segue too into being able to talk a little bit next time about how we utilize the deaths that occur in the county to really inform our prevention measures when it comes to traffic safety or identifying intersections, for example. With today's discussions, where fatalities are occurring, and identifying that as a issue in the community. And so, motorcycles versus vehicular accidents, that's something that we can look at per motorcycle rider versus vehicle driver. Is there a higher risk there? And when we were talking about COVID, that came to mind too, is that something that we do in public health sometimes is look at years of quality life lost, due to premature death. And so COVID certainly impacted the older population more significantly with severe disease. But I was glad, Dr. Reichert, that you mentioned that over the years working with medical examiners' offices, the best way that I can describe a cause of death is that if that didn't occur, the person would still be alive. And 110 times over this last year and a half or so now, we've had people die due to COVID infection that would have otherwise been alive had they not been infected.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Wright?
Thank you very much. I want to ask you to talk a little bit more about methamphetamines. They've been with us for a long time, and from the beginning, everybody known that they were causing a high rate of deaths. But it doesn't seem like we have gotten a handle on that. So is that a medical society issue? Is it a law enforcement issue? Is it a public health issue? Where they're coming from, how they get here, and then why are people continuing to use them? Because everybody knows that you're going to die from it sooner or later.
I would say yes to all the above. I mean, and so it is all of those issues. I mean, I think, obviously understanding people's drug use and addiction is one thing. I mean, I think all of those are really important points. I mean, I think speaking with law enforcement officials, one of the things that happen is, there's a supply and demand and cost issue. I mean, as things and accessibility change, if opioids price go up and methamphetamine goes down, and for cost, that affects things. And so all of those things are in play. But it's definitely a very addictive drug.
All right.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very much.
That was very interesting.
Thanks for being so patient.
Yes.
No, thank you. I appreciate it.
And while this was happening, Matt Peabody sent a message that he would like to contact us briefly as soon as the meeting adjourns or before the meeting adjourns.
Madam Chair, we have just a little IT issue regarding the multi-factor authentication. We need to make sure that you all get it done, and we'll do that after the meeting is over. It should take 5 minutes.
Okay. All right then. So I will withhold my quotes even till next meeting.
Adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.